Okay, so let's get into a little bit more kind of review. I know in 236 you guys did static routing, so I thought I'd kind of go over and do a little bit of a basic config and static routes review, kind of in Packet Tracer for you. So I've set up a small network here. On one side we have the 192.168.10.0/24. On the other it's the 20.0/24. And then we have a little point-to-point link in between our two routers at 10.0.0/30 with .1 and .2 assigned respectively. So let's get into just a little bit of some basic configs. So let's jump into our first router here and set this up. So first thing that we do, remember, is when we get into our regular configuration, our global config, we typically want to set a host name. So we do that with the hostname command, and we're going to call this router 0. Next couple things that are good to do is to set passwords. So we're going to set a enable password. So we'll say enable secret class. And remember, what secret does is it sets an encrypted password, quote unquote. It's really just hashed. It's not that strong of an actual encryption, so to speak, but is basically there to make it a little bit better. So the other option that we have there is enable password, but remember that enable password and enable secret are the exact same thing, but enable secret is just more secure. So if you ever see in Cisco or any exam that you're taking from me and I say set an enable password, use the more secure of the two options. So always use enable secret, don't use enable password unless the directions specifically state use this thing. So enable secret, we'll set our password to be class there. And then we're also going to go through and set up our passwords on our line const 0 and line v2y. So we'll say line con 0, and we'll say password Cisco. Make sure we say login to actually apply that password. We'll go into line v2y 0 through 4, and same thing. We'll say password Cisco and login. And remember, the difference between line con 0 and line vty is that line con 0 is how we're physically accessing it through the console port. We're setting a password on there. So when we initially open up a terminal and try and connect into it, we're greeted with a password prompt, and we need to enter in password Cisco. Then if we on line vty, that's our virtual terminal connection, and that's used for telnet or SSH. So, and the 0 through 4 there determines how many concurrent connections I can have over telnet or SSH. So I can have 5 total concurrent connections. Now, why would I need those? Well, we can set up different levels of permissions on each of the users that can log in via, say, SSH. And we can set up how they can actually, what they can actually access, what they can change on our device. So, I can have, different levels of users that can kind of play around and check it. So I might have an intern that I want to get more, give them experience working on the terminal, but I don't want them to actually muck up our live device. So I can create a user account with low-level permissions that gives them just some basic show command ability. But they can't if they try to go into conft global configuration, it would say denied access. So some things that are kind of useful. Okay, other things that are typically good to put on this is logging synchronous, and you typically put that on both your line con 0 and line vty. And the reason we do this is it will stop any new update messages that come in. Instead of interrupting you while you're typing, it will place it on a new line. It still moves you down a notch, like you just press enter, but at least it doesn't stop you when you're typing right in the middle of things. So other things that we typically want is going back to our global configuration. We want service password encryption is always a good thing to do. So that will encrypt, again, our passwords, so people can't view them when we're actually setting things up. So other things that we typically are going to want to set as well is we should typically put a banner message of the day. So we'll say banner MOTD, and we'll set our password for something like authorized use only. And remember, the reason we said our banner message of the day is this is essentially our legal sign that says no trespassing. So if we don't have this sign, then or if we change our sign to say welcome, come on in, and an attacker sees that and they're actually able to get into our systems, we have no real authority to prosecute them because we welcome them in. So gotta be careful about those sometimes. So that's not always 100% true, but there have been some instances when that occurs. So always make sure your banner always says something along the lines of authorized use only, or something to that effect. Other things that are good, we want to make sure we say IP, no IP, domain dash lookup. And remember, what that command does is it basically says don't check for aliases, don't look for something. So if I fat finger a command, instead of it trying to look up and figure out what that command is, it will just say that's not a real thing, go try and do something else, or retry your command. Alright, let's see. I think that's pretty much about it in terms of the basic configurations of stuff. There's a few more, but that should give you a pretty general outline of kind of what we're kind of looking at. So let's go over and look at actually putting IP addresses on things. So again, we're going to go into we're still on router 0, so we're going to go into G01, and we're going to set our IP address here. And G01 is the port facing PC 0 over here. So we're going to say IP add 192.168.10.1, and then we're going to turn that port on. Then we're going to go into our G00 port and say IP add 10.0.0.1, and it's a 252 because that's a /30 mask. And same thing, we'll turn that port on by saying no shutdown. And you'll notice that that port isn't going green yet, it's still red, but you can see that it says that the port state changed up. Now, if we want to check this and go, well, why isn't this turning green? If we do a show IP interface brief command, we can see, and I'll make this a little bit easier so that you see a little bit bigger there. We can see that the status is up, but the protocol is down. So here's an important thing to kind of note when we're looking at this. Status means the state of the port that I've turned it on, whether it's up or down. Protocol is whether it can actually send IP packets or not, so whether that is actually functioning. So think of this as me manually flipping the light switch, but the light bulb's burnt out, so it's not going to turn on. That's kind of equivalent to what we're looking at right here, where I've flipped the switch, but nothing's turned on, and it's not going to turn on because until the other side is up and functioning, this router is smart enough to go, hey, I'm plugged into something that's dead on the other end, a dead connection, so I'm not going to turn on because I don't want to send traffic out this port incorrectly if it's going to go to a dead end. So it's not going to turn on until we go over to our router over here and turn this one on. So I'm not going to go through and do basic configs again, but I will finish kind of walking through this because I want to do static routes here for you as well, and I don't want to make this too long of a video. So we're going to go into conf t. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go into our G00, and we're going to put our other IP address on, and then we're going to go into our G01. Oops. Typing is hard. Oop. And we'll turn that one on as well. And all my lights are green. So, yay, things are good. Now, the next thing that we want to look at is putting static IP addresses on our PCs. And then our gateway, remember our gateway is very important. If our gateway tells us how we leave our network, our LAN. So if I don't have a gateway, I can't leave my network. So I tell it that my gateway is the furthest point that I can see within my network, which is the 10.1, that G01 interface. And we'll go over to our other PC, and we'll put in our other address and its gateway of 20.1. Okay, so everything is good, right? Well, not quite. If we take a look at our routers now, so this is router 0, the left-hand router, router 1, the right-hand router. If I look at my show IP route command on both of these, oops, we can see the networks that I currently know about. Well, I know about on one router, I know about the 10.0.0/30 network, and I know about the 192.168.10.0/24. And on the other, it also knows about the 30 network, and it knows about the 20.0 network. However, neither router knows about the other router or the other network that it's not physically touching. So on our router 0 here, it knows about the 10 network, it knows about the 10 network, and knows about the 192.168.10.0 network. It does not know what the 20.0 network is because it's not physically touching that network. So you can see the C's right there. That means it's connected, it's physically touching it, which is why it shows up in its routing table. But it doesn't know where that 20.0 network is because it's not physically touching it. So we need to tell it where that network is and how to get there. So to do that, we're going to use static routing to do that. Now, we can use dynamic routing as well. I'm going to show you dynamic routing a little later on. But right now, let's just review kind of doing some static routes. So to write our static routes, we use the IP route command, and then we specify the network that we want to tell it about. So we want to tell it about the 192.168.20.0 network. And we have to tell it the mask of that network, so how big it is. And then we need to tell it, how do we get there? So we need to tell it to get there by one of two ways. I can specify the next hop IP address, or I can specify the exit interface. So in this case, I'm going to use the exit interface. I'm just going to specify G00. If I wanted to write the next hop IP address, which is who do I hand it off to next from this router 0's perspective, I would hand it off to router 1, 10.0.0.2. I could write 10.0.0.2. Or I can specify the egress interface, the interface I'm going to hand it out of, which is G00. So I'm just going to say G00. It's going to say a little warning saying, hey, if this isn't a point-to-point interface, stuff's probably going to go bonkers. Well, it is a point-to-point. Point-to-point is just a one device to another device. So that's all good. And then we're going to go into our other router as well. And we'll go conf t, and we'll do the same thing. We'll say IP route, and we're going to tell router 1 about the 10.0 network and how to get there, and then it uses its egress interface of G00, or I can specify again the next hop IP address of who does it hand it off to, which is 10.0.0.1. So again, I'm just going to use the G00, and that should be all good to go. So if we look at our show IP route again, we should see that a new route has been added, which is a static, and now I know how to get there. So if we test, I should be able to ping over to 192.168.20.10. And the first frame should fail, but then after that, well, first couple failed, but it just took a minute. That's sometimes with Packet Tracer. But now I'm getting traffic going back and forth with the replies. So there you go. There's a brief kind of review on going over basic configs and static routing. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Alright, till another time.